My name is Tom Thomas. I've been involved in organic agriculture since the 1950s. Bob Steffen was the person who introduced me to organic agriculture, and over the years has been an important mentor in introducing me to the practices and the philosophy of organic agriculture. I worked in organic certification for about 20 years, worked with organic materials review for about 25 years. And I've been working with organic farmers for the past 25 years or so. I farmed organically, vegetable crop production primarily, a little bit of corn, mostly sweet corn, melons, squash, tomatoes, pumpkins, those kinds of crops. I've worked with the University of Nebraska Extension over the years and find them to be a very valuable source of information and support. You just need to find the extension agents that are interested in working with organic. There are a lot of good ones out there. I'd be willing to answer any questions you might have. We're going to be talking about transition. I suggest that for transition, you find people that you are compatible with as far as mentors, and spend some time visiting with them, visit their farms. You learn more by visiting other people's farms and asking questions on site than you will usually any other way. Also, one important area is markets, and that you need to be taking a look at right from the beginning, both for yourself and whatever farmer you're going to be working with. And some of what you're going to be doing, that's my cat that's visiting here. Some of what you're going to be doing will deal with conventional markets during transition, and those will be important to finance your transition project. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Hello, I'm Lynette Steck, and this is my husband, Larry, and we are just here to share a little bit of our story in trying to find a succession plan for our farm. So we have farmed since we were married. Larry is the third generation on our farm here. So we farmed since we got married. Larry's dad passed away 24 years ago. And since that time, we've been renting Larry's mom's 3 80-acre tracts from her. And within that time frame, we've transitioned all of our ground, her ground and our ground, all to be certified organic. We also own 80 acres of the home farmstead place. And that includes about 30 acres of row crops and some pasture ground and tree lines and buildings and such. So that's kind of a little bit of what our surroundings look like here and our background. And about 12 years ago, we decided we better start looking ahead a little bit because we didn't know if when Larry's mom passed away, if we would you know, we knew we weren't guaranteed to be able to continue farming her ground. So at that point, we started direct marketing our pasture pork and building an alternative income in case, you know, something happened where we didn't have that organic row crop income. So we continued that way, having both kind of two businesses going. The erstwhile farm was the direct marketing, and Larry's row crop, organic row crops, was erstwhile grain. So we continued that until about 2014. At that time, we were in our early 50s, and we started thinking more along the lines of, okay, we need to think about retirement and who's going to take over, you know, our farm in the future. So at that point, Larry, you got anything to
So yeah,
add?
so none of our children were interested in taking on anything with the farm, our farm or my mom's farm, either one. And so we began the search for, you know, potential successors for organic, what we had put in place already. And that was something that we thought, you know, would take quite a while, and it really has, because when we were preparing for this meeting, she said, well, we started that way back in, you know, 7 years ago. And I was like, oh, I don't think it was quite that long, but it does take a long time. We had a couple of leads early on, probably 5 years ago. The one that, you know, they always sound promising in the beginning, and then they just, for whatever reason, things not that they really go awry, but they just don't materialize, I guess, is the best way to put that. And so about, was it 2 years ago, we put the ad on, Lynette put some more ads out online, like Moses, and the Nebraska Sustainable Ag Society, and those types
We
of
reached out to Center for
places.
Rural
Center
Affairs.
for Rural Affairs was another one, yeah. And so at that point, then we did get one answer from a couple, and then kind of at the same time, we were actually we had actually talked to a nearby couple that was interested in farming organically. And you know, to find someone that's interested in farming is tough, but I think it's, you know, the needle is in the haystack is even a little bit smaller, you know, than to try to find someone that's interested in farming organically. And we found a young gentleman that was interested in that. He actually initially called me up for some advice, and then because there was another organic farm that he was looking at. And then that didn't materialize, and then so we kept talking, and then the floods hit, and you know, circumstances, life goes on, and they decided that they weren't interested in doing anything with, you know, being involved with an organic farm. And so then about 1.5 years, I'm going to say, went by, and we revisited with them, and they said that that's kind of funny because they were actually kind of revisiting themselves, you know, talking about, you know, the possibilities, and maybe we shouldn't have turned this down, and some of those things. So we went ahead and got started talking to them about the possibility of stepping in and going into to some of you know, my mom's ground to be able to farm it.
Well, as far as Larry's mom's ground, that kind of we came across the Next Gen program, which is a landowner that is willing to rent to a new beginning farmer is has the opportunity to receive a tax credit. So we kind of looked into that, and since that requires a 3-year contract with the new beginning farmer. That kind of, I guess that kind of laid that out for Larry's mom said she would like to go ahead and do that. So that we started that process and the contracts are signed, and this next year will be the first year that the young farmer will be farming 2 of Larry's mom's 3 80-acre tracts. And so that's kind of a little bit of a long story with that, with the crop rotation within organics. Each tract has a different crop on it each year for the rotation. So the young gentleman is going to follow the crops instead of the organic ground and continue renting 2 of the 3 tracts each of the next 3 years. So so we're essentially, we are, you know, giving up some income because he's taking over 2 of the 3, but we just felt that that was important for him to get a leg up and get a start. So he's going to be, so I guess initially that's kind of how we got started with him, with that. And it's not really, it's more Larry's mom, but we're involved. We've been doing all the legwork and, you know, really essentially we just think it's important for the ground to stay organic. And if that's important to us, then we need to put in our time and effort to do our best so that continues. So that's the program that we've entered into as far as he goes on that. We sat and we're really working together. I mean, he is leasing the ground from Larry's mom, but we're working together with the equipment. We're working together with the equipment repairs. We're working together. Larry's helping him with figure out, you know, how to do organic paperwork. You know, Larry's helping him, you know, figure out the trucking. I mean, we're kind of helping, because for someone to just step in and figure out how to do it all on their own, it would be a pretty tall task. So we're really mentoring, I guess, him along and helping, you know, sharing equipment and such. So yeah, it's a group effort. That's the other thing. We've got another young couple that we've been speaking with, not necessarily for our livestock now, but maybe another enterprise on the farm that we own. So I guess we've kind of got the organic row crop kind of succession maybe kind of figured out for now, but we're also working on our own home 80 that we live on and how that will look like in the future. So this young couple we're speaking with, they're more into agroforestry, and they do pasture poultry, and so we're just trying to see how we can come together and maybe offer them some of our land to start planting trees and such. So I don't know. I guess we've kind of talked about how maybe something to consider would be to offer our farm as maybe like an incubator farm. So if people want to come in, and because we also have a state inspected kitchen on our farm, so that would be an opportunity for someone to use that for different enterprises. And you know, I don't know. As far as our farm ground, we're still kind of working through that. Well, we're working through that between ourselves, because I would love to be able to stay here and maybe build a farm back in the pasture and continue to help whoever is here as much, you know, if they want help. Or because I remember what it was like when we were young and had livestock and you could never leave anywhere. You know, you had to get somebody to do chores, and that was kind of hard to do when you were farrowing, and you know. Oh, sorry, that was our granddaughter. we know what it's like to kind of feel tied to the farm and, you know, not be able to take a vacation or, you know, get off the farm much. So, you know, and I brought that up to this other young couple, you know, how would you feel about that, you know? And they said, oh, we think that'd be great, you know, having somebody there to do chores if we wanted to get away or whatever. So in my ideal world, that's what it would be like. But Larry's not sure that would be his ideal world.
And at the same time, I'm not sure that wouldn't be okay with me. I guess I'm leaning towards the other way of, you know, relocating somewhere else, you know, whether it's nearby or not, I don't know.
We're just so used to growing our own food. And, you know, when I think about leaving the farm, my first thought was, well, what would we eat? You know, because I'm just so used to, you know, we do all of our canning and growing and I don't know, that was just kind of my first thought. But so that's still, I guess, to be determined. I guess some of the things we jotted down here as we were talking was, you know, at first you might think that, you know, it's a business venture to find a successor, you know, that's part of business, but we've kind of found out it's more of a heart venture because you're working. I guess we have a passion for what we're doing and we want that to continue on. It really turned into not a business venture, but a heart venture that we really, you know, we're getting to know these young families and hearing what, you know, what their dreams are and, you know, how can we help them with their dream and, you know, so that's kind of one thing that came up. And the other thing is that, you know, on the farm, we're used to manual labor on the farm, you know, to get things done. But this succession thing is a lot more mental and legal labor. It takes a lot of discussion and just trying to figure things out, you know, how would, you know, how to make things work, because, you know, it has to work for both sides, for the young family coming in and for us, you know, potentially going out, you know. So, and allow plenty of time for your thoughts to develop, for discussion, you know, go back and forth. We've had a lot of just phone calls back and forth and visits to the farm and just allow your thoughts and your plans to unfold. Don't think that your first thought, you know, is the best one. You know, you could have a million different ideas and you just keep working through them and talking and sometimes you have to try out an idea before you think, oh, no, that's not going to work, and, you know, go another direction. So we do feel blessed in that the two families that we're kind of working or speaking with now, we knew their families already. We didn't necessarily know them, but we knew, you know, of their families. So that made it a little more comfortable for us to move forward. So we feel very blessed for that.
Yeah, so that's kind of, to find someone that's interested, you know, especially in organic production, is a blessing, but then to kind of have a pretty good, you know, inkling of who you're dealing with is, you know, like Lynette said, I think a double blessing. You know, it's very fortunate to be able to have that sort of scenario pretty much just dropped in your lap, really. You know,
the other thing I think that came up was to think outside the box. You know, there's not a right or a wrong or like I said, a template to know how to do this, but think outside the box. Think about diversifying, or the diversity that could be between the new generation and the older generation. And the other thing that might be necessary or important are to look for different avenues of income to make it work. We brought up the next gen tax credit program. We're also looking into the Nebraska enterprise tax credit. We've looked at different grants, and we've passed different grants on to the new beginning farmer. So depending on your situation, that might be a necessary thing to look into to make it work. So I guess don't neglect those avenues if you need to.
The one couple was through Moses. We put a blurb or whatever you want to call it out on that, and they answered it almost, man, it was like the next day or 2 days later. And then the other one was just, like I said before, just dropped in our lap. I mean, it was just, he called. I know his dad not real well. I mean, we're acquainted. We went to school together, but he was quite a bit older than me, and so I don't know him that well. But he said, well, if his dad told him that, hey, if you're looking at doing something organically, Larry Steck farms organically, and I'm sure he'd be willing to, talk with you about it and stuff. So that's kind of how that one got started, was just this young gentleman's dad referred him to me because he knew I farmed organically. And so that was how that got started.
And that kind of brings up another thing that is kind of an issue. The housing thing, we're lucky that this one gentleman lives 10 miles away. That's going to be doing the organic row crops. But the other couple we're talking about lives a little bit farther away, still in Nebraska, but the relocation was a little hard for them. And then in our earlier talks, well, if you wanted to do something, well, where are they going to live? So that's kind of brought up a little more conversation within us about, the possibility of maybe down the road putting up some kind of a building that could also be a dwelling to accommodate, different people or different situations. So yeah, the housing thing, I guess, would be, something to consider.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess the only real closing thought that we would have is, I guess we're trying to get the ball rolling and get some things put into place and get it started, start the fire, you might say. But, there's no guarantees that it's all going to work out. There's no guarantees that, it may all work out and we may be completely out of the picture and they move on and farm and then things don't work out for them. I guess the bottom line, what I'm trying to say is there's no guarantees.
But we're just trying to get the next generation
Just trying to get the next generation started, and we can't do it for them. All we can do is just help them out and give them the opportunity. Yes, is kind of the key word there. If they have the opportunity, it's interesting to see when you're talking to them and stuff, the vigor, I guess, of youth and the enthusiasm and some of those things that, pretty much, gone by the wayside for me. I'm not near as enthusiastic about all of it as I used to be, and that's just goes along with age and,
we've got someone else to be enthusiastic about.
but we've got experience too. That's kind of a key to making, I would hope that was a big key to making something happen, is their youth and enthusiasm and vigor with our experience and wisdom and, learn from our mistakes. And, that doesn't mean we're not going to make more mistakes. But to just be able to give them that leg up, I guess, like we're saying, to get this going. Because otherwise they're really there's not really a whole lot of options. You can't just walk off the street and start farming organically. You got to have something somewhere. you know, to make
Build
that
on.
happen. Yeah, to
Mhm.
build on and make that happen.
Okay, good morning. I'm Martin Kleinschmidt. I live up by Hartington. And so I'm here to address a little bit about beginning farmers and access to land. And the reason I might have a little bit to say about this is I did it as well as a lot of other farmers. I did it many years ago. Actually, it was 1971. But I also worked for the Center for Rural Affairs after that. And my project there was to help beginning farmers get started. And of course, the major part of that was access to land. So I'm here to share a little bit of what I learned and some of what I did that you might get some help out of it. First of all, access to land is really, really important. We all know that you can't farm without land, but most people, or many people, think you have to own it. And certainly it's better if you can own it, but you don't really need to own it. Really what you need is the access to the land. Because owning it costs a lot of money and might not be where you want to be right now, especially when you're starting out. The other thing we want to know is that access to land is something you need to run a business, and farming is a business. And on the other hand, owning the land is more of an investment. It's something that older people do. They have it and they can work with it. When I started, and my two brothers started with me at the same time, we bought land from our father and worked it out, and we started as a partnership. And I really recommend this if you can do it. That partnership could be you and the landlord, it could be you and somebody else. Make sure it's a limited, it has a sunset clause in it so that at the end of that time, you can get out and so can the landlord. And that's really important because even if you're not working with anybody else, just working with the landlord, it's really good to rent that, I think. Renting it, again, lets you have the escape clause. If you find out, you know, this isn't really for me, or if I'm not getting along with the landlord, it will end and you're not locked in. So it's really a good idea, I think, to rent it. The other thing we should do is recognize the generational needs of each. You're a young person, you've got lots of energy. The retiring farmer, if that's who we're dealing with, is not quite have the energy level he used to. The difference, he has the land, he wants it run a certain way. He's really attached to that land. You want to be, and you really need it, but it's just not always going to happen that way. So you got to understand where he's coming from and where you're coming, and he should understand where you're coming from. This takes a lot of communication. Communication is absolutely important here. It has to happen. Without it, I can almost for sure guarantee you failure. And it also depends on where people are coming from. We talked with one beginning farmer who was accessing this land. Everything looked good. The deal was made. And then down the road, we learned that he really didn't want to leave that farm. His wife was pushing him to go to town, and he didn't want to do that. So as you might guess, after a year, it fell apart, and there was no coming back on that one. So again, it was hard on both the landlord and the beginning farmer. The other thing, so anyway, communication, you got to keep that in mind all the time, and bring the wives in on this too. Really, really important. They don't look so much at numbers, they're more at feelings, but by golly, you know, that's where a lot of the issues are when you're trying to deal with landlord and accessing their land. The other thing I would recommend is try for a premium. In your raise something that you can get a premium for is what I'm saying. If you're doing commodity work, you need thousands of acres probably, because the profit margins are so small. And that means a huge investment for you. Whereas if you're dealing with organic or something with a higher premium, you don't need as many acres. With fewer acres, you have less to invest, less risk there, and the market is there, and you can grow the same crops, commodity crops, type of crops as the commodity market, but you get more money for it. So I'd really suggest that. I work with a lot of farmers, and all these years working with that project, I've never found anything that works as good as the premium markets. And I'm talking about organic. We're talking coarse grains here now. And so that's where I'm coming from. I work with a beginning farmer, or was a beginning farmer many years ago. He's the one that farms my land now. He was a neighbor. He was a family relative. After working with him and him learning from me what we did on his farm and how we did it, he decided to do the same thing on his, and therefore he rents mine. And here's a guy that is buying land, buying machinery, and he's making money. So that's what we want for beginning farmers. Also, the premium market has less market competition. It does require a higher learning curve because these are things that you probably don't always know everything about yet, and you really can't go to your neighbor to find out. And that brings up another issue, and that's peer pressure. If you're doing that specialized market, whether it be vegetables or organic or whatever, and your neighbors aren't, just know that by golly, you are an outsider, you do not fit. And it's hard to carry on conversations because they don't understand you. It's easier for you to talk to them, but don't talk about farming with them because it's not going to work. So anyway, I worked with some farmers once on a carbon project. And at the end of the project, I said, what was the most important thing you learned about this? And they said, you gave us a safe place to talk about different ways of farming and different things. And I was really taken back on that, but it impressed on me the importance of peer pressure and how much that has to do with it. The last thing I want to do is talk about a friend of mine who was looking to start farming, and he found land in town. It was a small town, but he ended up looking at empty lots in town, and he started putting them together. They have water. They're laid out. People would appreciate a lot that is being managed rather than one that's growing up in weeds. It's something you shouldn't overlook. And he was able to do that. Plus he had a ready market right there too for his vegetables. So he was a town farmer. So that's good. Anyway, that's a little bit I have to offer today. My wife will have more to offer, I'm sure. She's been with me through all this, a real trooper, and I appreciate her being there. And so there we go. I'll be here this evening if anybody wants to talk about this more or have some questions.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alan Vanalik. I'm with the University of Nebraska, and I'm an extension educator that is working statewide on farm and ranch succession and transition. On this slide is my contact information, and even though I work from home a lot with pandemic, as I am today, you're still welcome to call me or email me. And if you call, go ahead and use this number. It's the campus number, but it records a message, and the message comes to me through email, and I will get back to you as quickly as I can. I pretty much promise within 24 hours, if at all possible. Today, I'm going to talk to you folks about a very brief discussion about the need for farm and ranch succession and transition. This is not a substitute for, this is not a substitute for actual estate planning. We're just here to drive goal generation and to get you to start thinking. If I could get anybody to move forward on this, I've done my job. You just got to get going. One assumes that in this environment, with a global pandemic, that should be even more motivation to get started. But to be true, you should be starting anyway, because we never know when some accident's going to happen or some unexpected disaster is going to take place. And so please start your estate plan now if you haven't done so. And I'm trying to give you some information so that when you go see a lawyer, when you go see a financial planner, that sort of thing, you have thought through some of this stuff and you can make better use of your professional's time, because quite honestly, when you go see a professional, Many of them charge you by the hour. And so therefore, if you have some of this planning or some of this thought done ahead of time, it's just going to work that much better. Yeah, it's just be that much better for you. Okay. When are we planning to retire? A Nebraska survey I did a couple of years ago said we're 35%, the top two categories there, plan to have some plans to retire at least. The other 54%, the bottom three categories, are saying they're never planning to fully retire from farming. I find that very interesting. What's even more interesting is to look at the Iowa numbers. In the state of Iowa, their survey said 31% plan to never retire and 47% said they only semi-retire. That's 78% plan to never fully retire or finish farming. So my point of my talk is to tell you, don't think about retiring. You're not going to anyway. You don't want to, but you should think about what happens to your stuff when you're gone. That's the point of my talk. Think about what happens to your stuff when you're gone. So why is it that we don't want to retire? We don't want to retire because most of the time we have trouble giving up control of the farm. I just talked to a farm family earlier this week, and they said, I said, how old's your dad? And dad was 52, 53, 54, something like that. How old's your grandpa? Grandpa's 80. How long has your dad had control of the farm to be able to make management decisions? Oh, not more than 10 or 15 years. I said, so you're the 20-something-year-old son, and you were mad at your dad for not giving you management decisions yet at your age? He didn't get them until he was 40. What are you expecting? He wants to have control, and it's a big issue with farmers. So don't mess up on the control part. I'm not saying that dad shouldn't give control, absolutely should, but he doesn't have to give all control because he just only had it for about 10 years. Modern farm equipment with GPS and steering and stuff like that allows you to go farm longer, and it makes it easier for farming primarily. People don't want to think about retiring because they think about their own mortality. The bad news is some people feel like they can't afford to retire. The good news is that 60% say they have a healthier, longer life. That's good news. 55% don't have a successor. It's something over half. I'm not sure 55% is maybe not quite right, but it's over half don't have a successor. And just over half don't know what else they do. And I talk to farmers all the time, says, well, why would I retire? I don't know what else I do. I don't do woodworking. I don't want to go to the bar and drink. I don't want to go to the coffee club and share stories and play cards. I just farm. I had a laugh. One farmer said, you know, I have football tickets. I don't mind going to university football games on Saturdays in the fall, but even now it's not as great as idea as it used to be. Not as much fun for sure. Now when you can't see them or see them not do so well. So what happens is we tend to delay this estate planning. We tend to put it off because we just got control. We don't want to think about death. And so we tend to put it off. And farm families express a lot of experience difficulty discussing the future. What we really run into is more often than not, planning tends to be deferred until some critical life event occurs, which forces the family to address the matter. I know firsthand of a family that found out that the matriarch, the grandfather, the father of the sons that were trying to farm, had dementia, and it was diagnosed. And worse yet, the doctor came to the family and said, you have about 2 months for dad to sign any papers about this dementia, or he will no longer be able to farm. So, he'll no longer be able to have a valid signature on any papers that you do. So that family had to act fast. And for them, it worked out fine. But for some families, they don't get that lucky. I mean, they had 2 months to get their work done. Some families, there's a tractor accident. Some families, there's a car accident. What if somebody ends up with COVID-19? I mean, there's critical life events which occur, which will mess this thing up. So let's get planning done before those events happen. I say that if you get the planning done before you have that critical life event, you'll have better decisions. Because if I'm stressed out about my dad having dementia, for instance, as an example, am I going to make the best decisions? Or if I'm upset that my father or my wife or my spouse got killed in an auto wreck, is that a good time to make decisions? Absolutely not. So do those things when there's less stress, and that's before you have the catastrophe. We don't like to plan because it's too complicated, we assume. And if we go talk to a lawyer, it's just interesting because lawyers tend to use terms that we don't like to think about, wills and trusts and probate and LLCs, and it just gets to be crazy. And you don't think in those terms, and so you can't get your head around what they're saying, and it becomes very confusing in a hurry. And we don't like to work. Don't like to do this planning because it's mental work, because we have to think and keep thinking through all these terms. some people just don't want to think about death. And we're afraid that if we do something now, in a few years, that will be wrong at some point in time in the future. And to be true, that's correct. It will be wrong sometime in the future. We're afraid that if we do something, we'll make a mistake. I will say that it's easier to correct a mistake or make a correction to a estate plan later than it is to not have one, because that could be a mistake worth hundreds of thousands of dollars if you're not careful. Whereas correcting an estate plan is just maybe a few hundred or $1,000 or $2,000. It's not very much. Near the end of any career, there's 3 types of planning that occur. We have to have the end-of-life documents and plans in place. And those are things like the power of attorney for healthcare, the power of attorney for the durable power of attorney, the power of attorney to handle my business affairs if I can't speak for myself, and the healthcare directive. Those are the end-of-life things that need to be in place. Am I willing to be hooked up to a machine? Do I not want to be hooked up to a machine? To what ends do we keep people alive? That's the end-of-life things. We also have to have an estate plan. These are things like wills, trusts, LLCs, or other structures that tell people what to do with our stuff after we're gone. This is what happens to our stuff. And then if you're lucky enough, you got somebody coming back to that business, then you need to have business succession planning, which is the part that talks about how you're going to get that business transferred on to the people that are taking over. So don't forget to do that too, and you need to have great family communications for all 3. I'm giving you 15 minutes of a 2.5-hour talk, so please go to my website and see more. I've got it all recorded there. What people tend to do is they tend to not do estate planning because they get into what I call the circle of inaction. Number 1, start with number 1. I should have a plan. Everybody kind of figures that out. Then you go on to number 2. You go to a meeting or meet with a lawyer. Well, this doesn't even count as a meeting, but you hear somebody talk about this. And you say, well, I probably should do more. You go and meet with a lawyer, or go to a full-blown meeting, you go, wow, this is complicated, it's giving me a headache, and I don't want to think about it, so you go on to step number 4, no action taken at this time. And the no action taken at this time can last somewhere between 3 months and 3 years. Believe me, I know it happened to me too. I needed to update my estate plan, and it took me several years to get that done, so don't do this. The better way is to just follow a process, follow a plan where you know you should have a plan. You go to a meeting with a lawyer, go to a meeting, you discuss the options with a family or come up with options with a family. You pick the options, congratulations, and you put a plan together, you get with the lawyer, get the plan signed and developed and put it in place. That's going to take you between 3 and 6 months, but it shouldn't take you longer than 6 months. That's the way to sequentially go through that so it makes sense. If you're having any work on an estate plan, like I said a minute ago, listening is the key. You need to communicate effectively and properly, and you got to make sure that you listen properly. That's the key to communication. This statement is underlined right here is the key statement. Key, seek first to understand, then to be understood. I'm not going to go through this whole slide because I'm running short on time, but seek first to understand, then to be understood. If we don't understand what somebody's trying to tell us, we have to ask more questions, ask more clarifying questions, ask questions that start with who, how, and why, and what do you mean by, how do you get to that conclusion, those kind of things, so that you have open-ended questions that they provide more, the other party provides more information to. Get your team together. Your team's going to include bankers and lawyers and financial advisors and CPAs and maybe even insurance people. And the big thing I would say here is just make sure that your team is communicating with each other. Don't start an estate plan with a lawyer without making sure your financial planner and your CPA and your insurance people know what that plan is, because if your plan includes buying insurance, then your insurance person needs to be involved. If your plan includes taking some money in a special account, let's say some kind of IRA or something like that, and you want to designate some of that to a charity at your passing, then the financial advisor needs to know that, so that that paperwork is set up. Don't forget to have everybody in that team taken care of. And here's where I can save you some money. Before you go see the attorney first time and working on your estate plan, you need to get these things together. Get this list together. Know what you have, what you own, what you owe, if anything, and what you want to do with your assets. In other words, you need a good balance sheet and you need a good plan for what you want to do with your assets. If you have that put together, the rest of it becomes easy. I'm starting a new program in 2021. So it's starting right now. As you're having your meeting, you should be able to get on this website and get this taken care of. It's called LandLink. We're trying to solve two problems. Land seekers don't have access to land so they can farm and ranch. The older generation does not have, about half the older generation does not have a succession path. Their children are not farming or ranching. So I'm starting a LandLink program, me and the Women Ag program, Jessica Groshoff out in the Panhandle, the Women Ag and Ag Succession, Farm Succession, starting this program called LandLink. We're trying to match land seekers with landowners. And we're going to use applications, use the land seeker, you would use an application, the landowner uses an application. And I'm going to be reviewing those applications and trying to make some follow-up phone calls with people to make sure those applications are complete and make sure I understand what people are saying in their application. And I'm going to try and provide information to landowners from land seekers that might be a fit. I'm going to try to do some matching. The land seekers then will decide, landowners then decide who they want to interview from the land seeker side, and we try and help them with support on how to set up questions and interviews and all those kind of things from both sides, both the land seeker, landowners, and maybe we get a match. I'm not expecting very many in a year. If I get a handful of matches in a year, I'll consider it to be a great success. So it's LandLink. To get to it, you go to farm.unl.edu/landlink. That'll be the website for this. If you got questions, contact me. The cool thing is, if you're interested in LandLink, know that as a Nebraskan, either a land seeker or landowner, the application's free. If you're up from out of state, there's a nominal charge. It's listed on the website. If you got questions, make sure you let me know. Here's some other places to get more information about succession. My website's at the top, agecon.unl.edu/succession. And at that site, I have my full 2.5-hour presentation. I'm giving you 10 minutes of that today. And there's Joe Hawbaker, an attorney out of Omaha, does a terrific job with ag articles, and he's got that site. The Iowa State Beginning Farmer Center is who we are mirroring the LandLink from. They have a kind of a land match program too. There's a place down in Kansas City called AgriLegacy that does work, and Purdue does work too, along with lots of other places. But this is just kind of a place, some places to get started. I'm Alan Vanalik, and I work on succession, and I would love to talk to you more. Contact me individually or contact me as one of your group members if you're a part of a group, and I'll be glad to set up a Zoom. I'll be glad to come out in person. I'll be glad to wear a mask. I'll be glad to travel wherever I got to travel. I have a travel budget. That's not an issue, and I'll be glad to get a hold of you. And if you want to get a hold of me and you need my information, I'll be glad to help out. I can do meetings anywhere from a half hour to 6 hours long. And believe me, I don't do sock talk for 6 hours myself. If I do a longer meeting, I either bring along a lawyer or a financial advisor, or sometimes both. And we really try and do it upright and give people in-depth information on how they're going to work on their farm and ranch transition and or succession plan. Great to visit with you. Have a great day.